Fabulous. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the last session. Sorry, I'm doing a don there, being a bit loud. I'm sure most of you need no introduction to this afternoon's speaker, but for those who are not particularly aware of him, it gives me a real great pleasure today to introduce Nigel Paine, who is a change-focused leader with a worldwide reputation.
I wrote that. No one else would.
One of the things you will, of course, know him for is for his work many years ago with the BBC. But more importantly, what you need to know is that he has a new book out in September called The Learning Challenge, which covers a whole load of topics, including big data, the world of work, the evolution of instructional design, and neuroscience. And in addition to which, the first in a series of new e-books is about to be released. Do you have a date for that, Nigel?
August, probably, end of August.
So watch out for that one, because the first one is on neuroscience, about which I think you're going to hear a little bit today. And not only that, get a bit of insight into what the inside of a learner's brain looks like, having seen one of the slides, something I know we've all been trying to do for years. So it gives me real great pleasure to introduce the only other person, apart from me as a West Ham fan, who's spoken on this stage, Nigel Paine.
Thank you so much. The room is full of West Ham fans, Andy. It's just that they keep quiet about it. They're not like us. They're not fanboys. It's the last session of the day. You can tell that. Look, dirty cup, dirty cup, dirty cup, half-drunk apple juice. So I realise it's the end of the day. I realise you've sat a lot. So I'm not going to just sit here and talk at you for 45 minutes and then 10 minutes for questions. I'll try to do this in a kind of brain-friendly way and preach or do what I preach. I've sat through hour-long neuroscience lectures by people who say, and the science proves that people really can't concentrate for longer than 20 minutes and just simply pour in, and they just carry on, and 98 slides later. So let's do it in a brain-friendly way. So the first thing is that I'd like you just to reflect on today. What is the buzz? What did you get out of it? There's a lot of tweets going around saying, this has been buzzy, it's been buzzy. What has buzzed you? What has really got you going? Just talk to someone around you. I'm not asking you to get up yet. Just talk to someone. What is the buzz? Is there anything, one thing that you've said yes? Or is it a whole string of little things? Or maybe nothing? Just have a chat about it. What's going on today that's been really good for you? I'll make my way back. First two comments I heard. One was, God, I caught up with a lot of interesting people. Nothing to do with the speeches. Someone else said, nothing really that I hadn't heard before. So I've had two, nothing dramatic happen. Did anything struck you?
Nothing dramatic.
Nothing dramatic. Anything undramatic?
Quite a few things that were
Name one.
Gamification, the last session.
Gamification, yeah, okay. Interesting?
Very interesting.
Right, okay. Anything? Your sticky learning was really good, wasn't it? That was a great session. Anything else that struck you?
Just conversations with people I already know, to be honest.
Yeah, okay. We'll change that a little bit before the end, I can tell you. Anyone else got anything they want to throw out? I'm not being inspired at the moment, I'll tell you. Anyone? Yeah, go on.
There seems to be a real feeling that institutions are not prepared to change or are not interested in change in the way that we've been talking about here, in breaking down learning and rebuilding it in ways that people can actually engage with.
Yeah.
And that's a real disappointment.
A lot of talk about how can I do anything within the confines of X or Y. Yeah. It's true. You were going to say something. Sorry.
Just said there. I actually got the impression from what David said this morning that whether we like it or not, the classroom as we know it will die. And that's scary in one way but exciting in another.
Yeah. Okay. The death of the classroom and the I suppose you could say the thriving life of the constraining organisation. So two interesting contradictory points in some way. Anything? Yes?
The last session there was talk of being a Trojan mouse, so making small changes.
Yes.
And I was also impressed with the idea of encouraging people to leave their technology on and incorporating it into face-to-face training.
Yes, yes. And there's no logical reason why you can't do that. I was in Montreal and had a huge argument with someone who said, I always insist that everybody turns the laptops off, they switch off their phones because it's just completely distracting. Don't you agree with me? And I said, no, I don't. I think that's completely the opposite of what you should be doing. And then we had at least a 10-minute bitter argument. He probably is still making people switch things off. But why not incorporate those things? Why not build them in? Any last point?
Nigel,
Yeah.
I haven't heard much about business alignment.
Yes.
And yet we're reading an awful lot by people in our profession saying we need to align with the business. And yet I haven't heard much about that today. I think it's there by implication, but it's still not being said, you know, maybe explicitly.
Yeah, I don't even know whether it was said implicitly. I've not heard anyone say that. No one's mentioned that today. Okay, thank you for that. I've been to 3 sessions. I went to the open session, then I chaired Donald Clark, and I've just been to one on storytelling, and I've just spent the 10 minutes I had between end of one and this one thinking, how the hell can I link those together? Because on the one hand, you had social learning, Donald Clark standing there saying, what a load of rubbish, it's all about individual learning, it's all about individual learning. And then we had the storytelling saying, if you can't tell a good story, if you can't build narrative, if you just have one thing following another with no logic and no passion and no commitment, how can you motivate learners? And if you can make the learner the center of the story, you create buzz, you create sticky learning. Back to that. So I thought, what actually links them? Well, the thing that links them is the brain. Because all of those things work in our brains to do with learning. The brain is not a cognitive beast that just processes information rationally, that learning is all about the frontal cortex. Neither is it all about being emotional and being chummy and collegiate necessarily. And neither is it kind of reptilian, feeling great, feeling satisfied, feeling happy, feeling scared, or any of those things. It's actually all 3 of those things. That the brain is like Kolb's learning cycle. We get stimulus, we need to process it, we need to engage with it, we need to reflect upon it, and eventually we need to embed it somewhere in order to help us change behavior. And to do that, we need to practice, we need to do stuff, not just think of things in theory. So the notion that learning is in some way abstracted from the rest of our lives is utter nonsense. We can prove that. We know that now. So in some ways, all 3 of those stories, 3 of those narratives were right, even though they openly contradicted one another on some level. So I want to talk about the brain, I want to talk about neuroscience, but it says it should change how we think about learning. And that's the debate in a way. It should have a question mark, I think. I think it should change the way we think about learning, but you've got to tell me whether you agree with that. And that's going to be a debate we'll have in the last part of the session. Because if we're going to learn from neuroscience, it really should be changing a whole bunch of stuff about what we know. Now, the first slide, this is the only slide that is the same as the one I used in January, so forgive me for that, but I love this slide. I've had it for about 10 months or something like that. I took it, for those who've never seen it before, I took a photograph of a fridge in Hong Kong. And on that fridge was that list, and it says, we are innovative, we have new ideas. We are resilient, we solve problems. We are self-determined, we're confident and respectful. We're integrated among, honest, reflective, confident with peers and others. Integrated within, honest, reflective, confident with ourself, with myself. Perceptive, see without being told, inquisitive, ask questions. Are they the kind of people we want to employ? I think they are. Where does that come from? It's the primary school targets for a 7-year-old in Hong Kong, a 7-year-old in Hong Kong. And it made me kind of weep. So I thought, how far are we away from all of this stuff in most corporate learning? How much do we might parrot it, but how much do we really care about all of these things? And that is my link in to why what we know about the brain should change what we know and what we practice about learning. But whether it's the right time, you can tell me. Whether we know enough, you can tell me. But I think we really should start to focus on the brain, which is an amazing beast. This is the world's 4th largest supercomputer. It's called K. It's in Japan. Used to be the first. Where is the world's largest supercomputer now? Where do you think it is? America. It used to always be in America. China. It's in China. Where is it in China? It's not, well, it's not all over the place, but it's in a military installation. It's the military. It's the first time the world's largest supercomputer hasn't been in a university and hasn't been accessible to quite a lot of people. It's locked down and it's military, and it's a lot more powerful than this beast. But the question is, I ask you, that's the world's first, fourth largest supercomputer. It's got 126,000 12-core processors. It's a big beast. It takes up a warehouse. If it was asked to process 1% of brain activity for 1 second, so 1 second of what 1% of your brain can do, so think about it, gone. Your brain does that in a second. That is approximately 1.7 billion nerve cells. So we have roughly between 100 and 200 billion nerve cells. So when people say, I better not have that glass of wine, I might lose some brain cells, who cares? There's a lot more. 1.73 billion, 1%. 200, between 150 and 200 billion nerve cells, which is nothing compared to the number of connections. So if 1% is 10.4 trillion synapses, links, 100% is quadrillions of them. So the supercomputer, there's no way it could mirror the process of the brain for the whole of the brain. So 1% of brain for 1 second, how long does that take this supercomputer to do? Anyone want to hazard a guess? Somebody I asked this and someone said 3 weeks. I go, oh, no, not 3 weeks. It's only 1 second of activity. Well, the answer is this, 40 minutes. The brain is amazing. And when you hear all this nonsense about, very soon, my phone will just be exactly more powerful than my brain. We've got a long, long, long road to go. And that is only the processing power. There's all sorts of other things going on in the brain, as well as just processing data, processing information. The brain is a powerful beast. And what I want to try and show you is that hardly any of it is really being used in learning. We can learn better, learn more effectively and more efficiently if we listen to our brain. I also want to try to focus on neuroscience, not pseudoscience. We heard Donald Clark ranting about pseudoscience, about people who postulate theories with no backup. So what I will try to do is link everything to books, research, organizations. I'm not making this up. I went to a neuroscience seminar where this, I thought, poor woman was telling us that we don't have one brain in our head, we have 3 brains. We actually have a brain in our heart and a brain in our stomach, which is why we get gut feelings about things, and while when we feel emotion, our heart flutters. It's because of the brain in our heart and the brain. So we are a 3-brained animal. Now, it's true that we have neurons in our stomach and neurons in our heart. We have something like 70 million neurons in our stomach. 70 million is against 200 billion. It's not a powerful brain down here. Even fewer in our heart. Why would you have brain cell equivalent neurons in our heart and our stomach? So the brain doesn't have to worry about all sorts of complex things going on with digestion and breathing. They kind of look after, they make decisions for us that we know nothing about, that are beyond our consciousness. They're regulating our life very helpfully, but they're not a brain that is thinking and is rational and conscious. And when we feel something, it's not coming from our heart, it's coming from our limbic system in our brain, and it might cause chemical reactions all through our body, but that's pseudoscience, it's nonsense. Let's stick to science. And what is science telling us? Well, there are a few books up there which tells us some good stuff about science. This textbook, this one here, this textbook called Neuroscience, this will be all on the slides, so you don't have to worry about writing them down. That's a 900-page textbook on every aspect of the brain. It's updated every 2 years. That's how fast things change. If you really, really want to read that, if you've got a bit less time and a bit more, let's just plunge in. David Engelman, called Incognito, The Secret Lives of the Brain. Your Brain at Work by David Rock, who's a bit of a rock star. He does a lot of conferences about work and what is neuroscience talks about work. This amazing book called The Woman Who Changed Her Brain is about someone who was severely learning disabilities as a child, worked on exercises and rebuilt her brain so that she more or less overcame those disabilities. A remarkable woman. And it's based on theory going back to a Russian called Laura in the early part of the 20th century. The Blank Slate by Steven Pinker about the difference between nature and nurture. And then probably the easiest and most accessible thing, The Royal Society, i.e. kosher science organization has produced 4 reports on neuroscience. This one is called Neuroscience, Implications for Education and Lifelong Learning. Sounds dry, it's actually brilliant. It's module 2 of their series. Just put brainwaves into Google, read that, came out in 2011, and it was the Royal Society saying we should be talking about neuroscience and learning. We've got enough data to make some decisions and draw some conclusions and to try to influence the world of education. It's a bit focused on schools. People, I don't know why scientists seem to be utterly focused on kids and not about lifelong learning, but it does say lifelong learning. It's just that not a lot of the report is about lifelong learning. So those books are worth reading. And this is from Brainwaves. This is what it says. The 5 things we absolutely know about learning. Learning works best with emotional engagement. If you can build emotion through the storytelling that I was hearing about half an hour ago, through ways of creating drama, through ways of involving the learner, you get better learning. We had to do, in the BBC, we had to do an unbelievably tedious program on compliance on checking sources. You know, you have to have 2 sources, 1 source and then someone to corroborate the source. And the BBC was being a bit slack, so we were commissioned to do this. So we could have done, here are the rules about corroboration, page turn. And then you do these 4 points, page turn. And there are also these other 2, page turn. Let's test your learning. What do you do when you do this? Page turn. What we did, if you can imagine sitting in the room, small room, suddenly that door opens. In rushes someone with a pretend phone saying, I want to speak to the news desk and I've only got 2 minutes, please could you get a journalist, please could you get a journalist? And someone else pops up in the room who's an actor, says, yes, news desk, yes. There's something going on, there's something really, you should get down there, there's something big, I've got to go, phone goes down. Guess what? You suddenly had people who are totally switched off, going, oh God, how long is this going to, 3 hours, oh, I wish my life could end now. Suddenly they're awake and alert. And it was just a trick. So we built the story around the group, and the group made all the decisions. And guess what? They learnt it without learning anything. They knew what they had to do. They knew the consequences of sloppy journalism by the end of the sequence, because there were many, many different branches, all skillfully managed by those 2 actors and then someone, facilitator, who could pull out the learning at the end. So emotional engagement, we know this. We don't know a lot about this, that exercise is critical for brain health. More and more we know about that. There's a famous neuropsychologist whose name has just gone out of my head, who in 2006 said, all this nonsense about exercise, yes, there's a positive correlation, but it's very, very small. Within 6 years, that has been blown apart. And I'll show you why in a second. If you think that giving your staff brain games to play is going to keep them really, really tuned in and spunky and sharp, it won't. Brain games, all the research says, make people extremely competent at brain games. There's no cognitive transfer at all. And they did it in London, and they repeated it in San Francisco, because no one will believe it. It must do something bigger than just, no, it doesn't. If you really want your staff to be tuned in, to have their brain ready for learning, send them for a walk. It's extraordinary, and I'll share the evidence with you. The third is, guess what? The learning environment. Drab, dull environments with grey walls and no windows are far less conducive to learning than bright, colourful environments where people feel involved, feel that it's pleasant and a good experience to be there. Ditto online. Ditto online. And huge numbers of organizations think about the physical environment, never think about the online environment. Both are really important, and there's no reason why you can't use both together in learning. And the 4th thing is really important, and I want to talk a bit about this as we go on. The aging brain is different, but not necessarily worse. There are parts of the brain a 20-year-old can access that a 50-year-old can't. There are parts of the brain that a 50-year-old can access that a 20-year-old can't, for very good reasons, because they're at different stages in the learning life cycle. And the idea that your brain peaks at 18, whatever you want, 19, 21, You know, it's a bit like men and sex. You know, peaks at, it's all downhill after the age of whatever. It's not true at all. I don't know about the brain, but in the brain, you can learn and you can draw on your experience and you can build connections through to the day you die if you take care of your neurons, you look after your genes. Rather like your body will serve you better if you look after it than if you eat 5 packets of KFC sitting in front of the television every night. The equivalent of sludge in your body creates sludge in your brain. And the real issue with the brain is that as you get older and the pathways that you built sometimes decades away are not challenged, your brain just goes down these pathways. It's like snow, you know, when they clear the snow, you've got these massive piles of ice and you just walk and you can't go this way because it's big, you have to wait till the gap in the ice. Your brain becomes like that. The pathways are reinforced, but the new pathways get harder and harder to fire. It's one reason that older people are more resistant to change. I don't think it's because there's some innate characteristic of old. I think it's simply that their brains go with what they're secure in. And if you don't create insecurity and challenge, how can you expect them to embrace, oh, no problem, I'll just throw my job in the air and completely restructure everything. That's fine, I'll be very happy with that. No wonder 20-year-olds, they've got no vested interest in their brain. 50-year-olds have vested interest in their brain. So it's almost like everything that we know about working with 50-year-olds is wrong. All of the people who think that you're 50, stay where you are, you're doing a great job. We won't don't worry, you're on the way to retirement. We'll give you a nice easy 8 years or 7 years or whatever it might be. That's okay. It's the worst possible way you can build motivation in an older workforce. It's the worst possible way you can help their brain. And what you're doing is you're giving them a little check with, hi, welcome to dementia in 15 years' time. The theory now, the extraordinary theory now, is that dementia is controllable, i.e. the genes, the tendencies, is controllable by maintaining neuroplasticity and by building what is called cognitive reserve. Cognitive reserve is like fitness. When you need it, when your brain is under stress, the cognitive reserve is that extra ability to root round problems. And the most extraordinary thing of all is research in California at the Osher Center for Integrative Medicine, Dr. Joel Kramer. I'm citing my sources. Joel Kramer has 2 brain scans of a 75-year-old, both showing signs of advanced Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is like plaques, knots in the brain. The links in the brain get cut for reasons we don't really understand, and they knot. So if you can imagine a rubber band knot, and they're all over the brain of someone with Alzheimer's, and guess what information can pass through those knots? Nothing. 2 men, 75 years old, advanced signs of Alzheimer's. One person is performing perfectly normally. You would not know there's anything wrong with the person. The other person can't remember their name. It's astonishing. How can that possibly be? The answer is that the first person's brain has gone, roadblock. I've got enough plasticity in my brain to root around the problem, and I'll find meaning and continuity somewhere else. The other person's brain goes, roadblock, can't do anything about it, shut down. And as the brain shuts down, it begins to focus more and more on the self, on self-protection, less and less on the environment, and can function less and less in the environment. If this is controllable, every one of you has got a duty of care, if you like, to your aging workforce, to give them the challenge and the encouragement and the stimulation to keep those brains really going. And it's not that everything's hunky-dory to 50. If you get people in jobs from the age of, they move around, 25, they're there, it's a disaster if they spend 20 years doing the same thing. It's an absolute disaster because everything else shuts down as well. You'll find those people never go to the same place on holiday. They live in the same house. They drive the same route. They have the same car. They have the same husband, and they have the same dog. Nothing changes. And therefore, when there's any kind of catastrophe in the brain, it can't cope. And who knows the cards that we've been dealt genetically? We have no idea. Just as you have no idea what the cards you've been dealt genetically in terms of your physical self. You know, everybody in this room knows, and they didn't know 30 years ago, that staying fit is your best way of hedging your bets. We now know that the best way of hedging your mental bets is to keep that brain going and keep it going. The other thing, the fifth thing is really important. No brain learns without reflection, and we give no time to reflection. We never build reflection in. And I want to build a little bit into this session. You need time to think and process and own the information and turn it into knowledge and behavior and attitude and maybe change. But you will not change someone by just telling them, do it, it's good for you. The company says you have to do it. It's right, it's the way forward, it's the new mission, it's the new vision statement. Doesn't mean a thing. And if you read Charles Duhigg's Power of Habit, you'll see how habitual we are as human beings. It takes a long time to break a habit, especially one that's grown over years and years. And yet we somehow expect that, because I told you once, 15 years of exactly the opposite will just fade in an instant. Oh no, it won't. We have to be much more tolerant of habit. Kahneman, if you read Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow, Kahneman is saying the immediate reaction, our fast brain wants a solution. It doesn't want to have to think too hard. Our brain can be lazy. And if you want to get beyond the immediate reaction and thinking slow, integrating new ideas, you have to be aware of the need to break down habits and take your time to get things moving. It's really important. There we go, look. That's the brain as you're sitting there. That's the brain after a 20-minute walk. It's unbelievable. That's not in a boxing ring for 20 minutes. It's not running up stairs for 20 minutes. It's walking for 20 minutes. The brain is fired up. Interestingly, LinkedIn, the CEO of LinkedIn, all his one-to-ones are walking. He thinks it's the best way to create attention, and also he likes the relationship with the people he's walking. It's easier to walk. In all my workshops, I send people off on walking in pairs. 10 minutes one way, 10 minutes the other way. One person talking the other way, and the other one listening, and vice versa. So it's about listening as well as talking. 10 minutes one way, 10 minutes the other. A 20-minute walk, and the most tedious, boring me becomes interesting after a 20-minute walk. People are even prepared to sit up and listen. It's like starting the day all over again. It is remarkable. Try it. It's simple, practical neuroscience. And the idea that we sit people all day in the same place is insane. How does a call center? I would love to track the neural functioning of someone who's been in a call center for 6 hours, sitting in the same seat with a couple of 15-minute breaks and a 45-minute break. They are brain dead by the end of the day. How they can engage with your really interesting, intricate problem, I don't know. If they said to them, every hour, I want you to go walking for 10 minutes, they'd actually end up with more productivity, not less productivity, but they're not listening and they're not learning the lessons, and they think that stuck in front of a computer, AKA lots and lots of learning. That's a really important slide, I think. So there's the old brain. It's in 3 layers. The bottom is your reptilian brain, the flight and fright brain. That's what reptiles have. They don't have any other brain than that. In the middle is, crudely, if you like, is your limbic brain, your feeling brain. And on the top is your rational brain, rational processing. And this frontal cortex there is what differentiates us from all other mammals. We've got more brain up there, which makes us more rational, more able to process, think, do things more than just react emotionally or fight and flight, which many animals have got. So the whole brain needs to be involved in learning, not just the top of the brain. They are the 3 bits of brain. There are 44 areas of the brain, and they were discovered by Brodmann in 1909 by using stains to differentiate the cell groupings. It's still the Brodmann areas, 1909. So the idea that all we ever learnt about the brain we learnt in the last 20 years is rubbish. Brodmann revolutionized the way we looked at the brain. But he also built the seeds of the problem that we have, which is that we believe that each one of those areas has a specific function. And once that function is damaged or it's limited, nothing you can do. The brain is hardwired, emerges out of Brodmann's research, and it's a logical conclusion. Different neural areas are separate and therefore have separate functions, but it's not true. What also is true is this notion of relaxed immersion, relaxed alertness, immersion and active processing. We need an active brain, not a passive brain. And we need to do away with fear. That's a blog in HBR, Harvard Business Review, saying that in small organizations, toxic leadership is critical. In bigger organizations, it's not so critical, because where there's toxic leadership, people simply, rather like active brains in countering plaques, they root round it. They go somewhere else. I think that toxic leadership is a critical negative indicator for learning. Toxic leadership takes away your motivation for learning. So what matters is this beast here, neuroplasticity. The fact that the brain can remodel, remake itself throughout life is incredibly important. That's Alison Cooper from the University of Birmingham. And what she says is that there are 3 times when the brain is going crazy. At the beginning of life, and any of you who've ever had children will know instantly what I'm talking about. You watch a brain learning. You almost watch it viscerally as a child grabs ideas and perceptions and words and concepts and begins to make sense of the world day by day in an extraordinary way, learning 50 words a day. You try and learn 50 new words a day. You'd struggle. It would take you most of the day. Kids do it without even thinking, just processing. When there's brain injury, the brain rewires around those injuries, or tries to. At that point, the more plastic the brain is, the easier it is to rewire. And then finally, the most important thing, throughout adulthood, when something new is learned. You learn nothing new, you have no challenge, you stop having a plastic brain. The brain gives up. Don't need to be plastic anymore. Don't need to build any new links and synapses. Okay. Spoken for way too long. I'm going to stop there. What I'd like you to do now is just try it. Stand up. Just tell me what the difference is. Stand. If everyone stands up, with one exception in the front, you don't have to stand up. Now, if you just go and find someone you've not talked to before in this room and ask them a question, one simple question, and that is, is anything resonating? Is anything that strikes you about all this? So just find someone new. Okay. Okay. Stay standing if you want. You want to stay standing?
Yeah, we'll stay.
All right, stay standing for a bit. Stay standing, but share some of the insights. What were you saying to each other? Anyone want to share anything? Yes.
We were talking about the fact that I've got an elevator desk, so I can stand up and
Yes.
work, or I can sit at work.
Yeah.
I work from home. I bought it myself. I got it through eBay. It was only 250 quid. And the fact that sometimes I want to kind of stand up and I feel more creative, or it just, enables me to think in a different way. Plus the fact from a physical point of view, as he was saying, it's really good. And there's been programs and studies about how it affects metabolism and thinking and all of those other things. So that's something we were talking about.
Yeah, and you don't have to stand up the whole time, but you shouldn't be sitting the whole time. It's the point about movement. And just this experience of standing up talking, I'm not going to ask you to analyze it, but I think it's different, it feels different, and you feel differently in relationship to me, and you feel differently in relationship to each other. And I don't understand the logic why we should be sitting all day at everything, that there's never a chance when you can get to stand. The Queen runs the Privy Council is done standing up. It's been done for centuries. The Queen comes into the room and she goes around the various groups of people who are standing up and they make decisions and she leaves. Done, Jill. Sorry.
I say with all of our project meetings now, we run them as stand-up.
Yes.
So allowed to sit down.
Yeah, and they're much quicker and much more effective.
Quicker, much more effective.
Yep, because we like standing, but not for an awful long time, because we do need to sit there sometimes. Yeah. Any other insights from this that you think are quite interesting? Yes.
We come across quite lots of interesting ideas, say in the session on stories, the ones that sort of appeal very quick into the sort of fast thinking way of thought. But if we don't stop and reflect and try to work them into our practice, then
Yes.
we're lost.
It's true. It's true. It's good to engage emotionally and to be there, but it's not sufficient. It's the right way to start, but it's not necessarily the right way to stop. And how many times have you left something completely fired up, yes, and you've forgotten by Monday and nothing happens because you just never went through that process of reflection? I'm notorious for taking notes and never reading them again. And I might as well not bother. I consciously try now I'll go back and read everything I've written from today, and I'll try to grab as many tweets as possible from today and favorite a whole bunch of them. It just helps me think about something and remember it. But otherwise, emotion isn't enough. What were you saying? You two.
So we now run a number of our kind of one-to-ones at least walking. So within BP, we'll frequently get out of the office and walk around. And whether or not it improves the quality of those conversations, the research, as I think the lady referenced, does show that it extends your life expectancy.
Yeah.
So,
And also extends your ability to concentrate. Unbelievably, walking, when you're trying to avoid walking into lampposts, you've got other things going on. You're actually taking more in than if you're just sitting passively, particularly for a long time. These things they're simple, but they make a massive difference. And if you seriously think that you can lock someone in a room and run a workshop from 8:30 in the morning till 5 at night, and you've got exactly the same people in the room at the beginning as the end, they might be physically with you, but mentally, whoa, they're doing a million other things. And the idea of saying, we'll force you to shut off your computer, that doesn't force you to shut off your brain. Anyone last thing from, yes?
Yeah, I don't know if people in the room have come across Jan Kaufman, Jan Morgan.
No.
She's one of our learning community. She had a stroke 3 years ago when she was 49.
Yeah.
And she wasn't expected to survive because it was a brain hemorrhage. And she has literally rewired her brain. She's now able to do a bit of walking again. She's now going back to consultancy work. She can drive. And it just, nobody thought she could do it. But as a learning person, she knew she could.
And that's half of it. The problem was that 20 years ago, they would have said to her, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do. You're going to be a vegetable for the rest of your life. The brain, you've killed bits of your brain, there's nothing we can do. So in some ways, to say to her, you can do it, and to have her motivation there, saying, I can do it, it's a miracle. The brain is amazing.
And it was technology, it was social media and technology and her Facebook friends communicating with her that helped her do it.
Yes. Yeah. Because you need emotional engagement, encouragement, stimulation, because it's hard. You don't rewire the brain in 2 seconds. It takes thousands of repetitions, literally thousands of repetitions. But eventually those neurons fire and then they wire. And that's what you need. They fire and they fire and eventually they make that link. And once it's there, it doesn't go. The brain is not a muscle. It doesn't all, if you stop exercising the brain, it doesn't go blah, 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 back again. You don't lose the links, you just solidify the links. So the brain, the metaphor of the muscle is exactly the wrong metaphor. That's not how it is. But the brain is something that needs to be continuously rebuilt. And that's what she's done. She's literally rebuilt her brain. But we can all do that by learning new things, by being challenged, by putting ourselves in uncomfortable positions. If you go on holiday to a strange place, I was in Japan. Japan was an intense learning experience because you can't speak the language. Very few Japanese can speak English. Everything is confusing. The culture, the way you do things. You're learning. And that process has a knock-on effect in the rest of your life because you feel comfortable in having mastered new things. You feel more confident about mastering other things. So that process of learning is a process that should continue, and it builds confidence, and the opposite is also true. You don't learn, you lose confidence, you imagine you can't learn, you can't change, you don't want to change, and then you get into all sorts of problems. And next year into dementia, I'm just going to, I think, just a couple of slides, and then I'm going to finish. This quote here was Guy Claxton last in January, saying that managers should be coaches of learning power. I think that is absolutely brilliant. Managers, leaders as coaches of learning power. How many leaders are told that being coaches of learning power is a critical part of their role? Hardly anybody. What actually happens is this: shut happens. Shut happens all the time. And when shut happens, it's difficult to get open. So if you can avoid shut in your own personal life and in the life of the people that you're working with, in your organizations, massive increase in your own personal productivity, your own personal confidence, the productivity of your organization, and the productivity of the people you work with. And we know enough to make these kinds of statements. This is not a piece of pseudoscience nonsense, over-optimistic nonsense. It's true. And in some ways, the story that Leslie just told is proof of that you can remake your life through being confident and in believing that you can remake things. I know what's happened. If you think about the way organizations are structured, if you think about the sort of networked organization, this guy's like Alzheimer's in the corporate brain. This guy is a block of knowledge. He's not processing anything. Everything is coming to him and hitting a brick wall. So in some ways, if you're serious about building network organizations, you've got to be absolutely serious about engaging all the individuals in the network. Now, sometimes they can root round. If it is a well-networked and deeply networked organization, you can get round it. But in other circumstances, you can't. So it's, in some ways, even more important to build emotional engagement and passion in organizations. Donald stood on the stage this morning and said, "I don't want to be happy. It's got nothing to do with happiness." And there are some people who don't want to. I don't want him to be happy necessarily. I don't want him to be skipping around the place. But I do want him to feel engaged and feel that he belongs and he feels he's making a contribution. All of these things come with learning and are a byproduct of learning and link to the ability to learn. Everything comes together. And the problem is that as learning and development, there's a limited amount you can do all on your own. In a company where there's fear, where there's a complete demotivation and mistrust, learning goes nowhere. By definition, almost. It requires that environment that is right to learn, and we have to spend time getting the environment right as well as the content. I used to use the picture of the drop of water, saying that we've spent so much time making the drop perfect, we forgot about the ripple. And it's the ripple that's really important. The drop it's significant, but it's not as important about the ripple. And if the power of our learning is taken away by the toxicity in the organization, it's not your fault. But you should be aware of it, and you should engage with it and try to deal with it. And it's rather like this. I think I'll probably finish here, and we'll finish on a little discussion. I was flying from Australia, and I woke up in the middle of the night. Well, I didn't know whether it was night or day. It was dark in the cabin. And I wanted to know where I was. I thought, I didn't know whether I'd been asleep for 5 minutes or 5 hours. It's a weird, weird feeling. So I thought, I'll put on the monitor. I'll find out where. Flight Tracker will tell me where I am. 3D Flight Tracker. Probably cost £100,000 to install on that plane. There's Flight Tracker. I switched it on, and that's what I got. It's really useful. At least I knew I was just between the blue and the brown. It's extraordinarily helpful. I had no idea where I was. Why? No scale, no reference points, no context. And that's what we know about learning. That if you deliver learning with no scale, no reference points, and no context, it's like flying blind. That's why a lot of leadership fails. We deliver leadership with no scale, no context, and no reference points. And how am I going to apply it? Yep, it's great theory. Yep, I get that. How do I apply it? What do I actually do in my job? How does it make a difference to me, my organization? flying blind. And if one thing we know about the brain, it needs scale, reference points, and context, just as my poor brain, tired, bizarrely chopped up brain on that flight needed a bit of scale, context, and a reference point. We need that. We really, really need that stuff. And if you ignore it, then you're ignoring what your brain is screaming at you. And somebody said to me, Neuroscience, this is all so damn obvious. We've known this stuff for years. It's just our intuition. You're just telling us our intuition was right. Well, kind of. I'd be very worried if I was telling you your intuition was wrong. But I also think there's some real depth now in terms of what we have to do to make leadership work. So what I want to do to finish is just, if we could have a little debate. If this side of the room, if you can just chat to one another, you can stand if you want to, or you can sit if you want to. But I just want you to say, there's these reasons why we shouldn't do anything yet. They're really good reasons why it's not a good time to do something. And I want you to say, this is the absolute right time. We need to do something, and probably this is the kind of thing we should do. So I'd like just to, so the naysayers and the yay-sayers. So I want you to just stand or sit or chat, but naysayers, why we shouldn't do anything, yay-sayers, why we are going to do something. And guess what? In the last few minutes, we're going to have a mix. So up you get, or move around, yay-sayers, naysayers. Any good naysayer points emerging? Anyone convince themselves no? No? Any naysayers? Any naysayers?
We're all naysayers.
Good.
Yeah. It's not bloody Google.
Risky.
We've decided that it wouldn't work here. It might work there, but it certainly wouldn't work here.
Okay. We're in the last few minutes. The naysayers, it wouldn't work here, just wouldn't fit in our organization. They might enjoy it, but whoa, it's too risky, not a good thing to do. Betting the bank on something like this, not a good idea. Yep. And any other? Did I miss anything?
Health and safety as well. You're standing up, walking around, bumping.
It's dangerous. It's dangerous. Yeah. It is. It's true. It's ridiculous. In fact, it's ridiculous. Yeah. What about any other good nay points? Has anyone got? Yeah.
Other companies are not doing it yet. We want to be.
Yeah. Why should we be the first? Why should we risk it? Why should we look like fools when the next bit of research says it was all rubbish anyway and we should just drink coffee or whatever it might be?
We haven't got the time.
Yeah.
We haven't got the money. Doesn't fit with our strategy. What else have we got? We've had no money. It's too hard. It's too difficult. Security. Yeah, we haven't got security.
Permissions. People won't like it anyway. It'll be a pain in the neck to implement. Yeah.
Even if the science is right, what if we implement it wrong?
Yes.
Why not find somebody else, watch what they do,
yes.
and then make the mistakes?
Let them make the mistakes. Let the pioneers have catastrophe, but eventually find their way. We'll follow. We've got plenty of time. We don't need to rush into any of this stuff. Yeah. Anything else? Anyone else? Yeah. What's wrong with? Look at the results we're getting. Look at the smiley faces all the way. What's wrong with what we're doing now? We're getting great results. Everybody loves what we do. Why should we change it? Okay. Yay-sayers. Can anyone give a good positive reason why they should be moving in this direction? Yeah, get there first. This could give us a competitive advantage. This could lift us an exponential level, not just a small step.
We're doing everything else. Everything else in business lives is different.
Yeah.
Everything else in our personal lives is different.
Yeah.
It seems like the last bastion to change ever is bloody learning.
So we should.
Yeah.
There's too much change. We can't afford not to do anything.
Yeah. There's too much change in our organizations. Andrew.
All we've been doing so far is giving people information. We've not been giving them knowledge.
Yeah.
We need to give people context. We have to take them away from sitting in a classroom and being talked at. They need to do it in work with people who can help them do their work.
Yeah. Okay. Any Any other points? Yeah.
Why not?
Indeed. What have we got to lose? Very little. Very little. Anything else? Anyone at the back? Anyone? Yes. So there's always too few chairs for the number of people in the room. It's one way of doing it. It might feel like you were the next one to be made redundant, though. Anything else?
You might enjoy it.
You might enjoy it. It might be fun. It might transform everything. Yes.
The technology's there, so there's no excuse not to move forward.
Yes. Yes. The world is changing. We have lots and lots of freely available new tools. It's exciting. There's all sorts of reasons why we should do it. It may be worth the risk of being the first. Yeah.
We won't get dementia.
We won't get dementia. Yeah. I worry about that kind of stuff, but I would. I'm a lot further down the road. It scares the hell out of me. That's, yeah. If I can do anything I can to not get dementia, I will do it. I'll hop on one foot if someone told me it was a good idea to do it for an hour a day. I'll do anything. Any other points? Right, let's just say, how many of you were convinced by the naysayers? Has anyone, it resonated? Oh, I see it kind of, yes, I understand that. I understand where they're coming from.
We don't agree with it.
Right. It's familiar. Yes. How many of you were convinced by the naysayers? Anyone here think, yep, I really get that. I really get it. Yeah? Yes, pretty much? Okay. I'm not going to say I rest my case because it's a pretty easy case to rest. But my message is that you've got to do something. It's about doing stuff. It's not about having an intellectual debate. It's about making small changes, not big changes. Someone said that. You said that. The small steps. There are things that you can do which can make learning different, more effective, and move towards actually transforming learning. You know, Andrew's saying, we're not talking about a little step, we're talking about completely repositioning its role in organizations. So we're almost bang on. I think we should probably finish that.
Fabulous. Ladies and gentlemen, what a great way to end today. We were chatting over there just now, and I don't think I've ever heard this topic discussed at Learning Technologies. If I have, I must have been asleep by a poor presenter. What a great presentation. Thank you, Nigel.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Did you notice that the moment...
And also, don't forget to visit nigelpaine.com around about August to check out his new e-book, which includes a lot of stuff on neuroscience, and of course Amazon.com and other good and bad bookstores for his new book in September.